Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hi, and welcome to the ISO Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. Well, I've got a really interesting guest on today, Æsc George, who's going to be telling us all about his journey with the implementation of ISO 27001 at Monolith AI. So, welcome, Æsc. How are you?
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. I know that you're fresh from just completing a stage 2 assessment for ISO 27001. So before we begin, I just wanted to say congratulations on completing that successfully.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're all very happy about that one. We are just recommended for certification right now. We're eagerly awaiting the formal certificate to come through.
Yeah, cool. So Ash, I know you're the senior software engineer at Monolith AI, but it'd be good to get a little bit of background information on you. Could you just explain a little bit more about what you do, and could you tell me something that not many people know about you?
Yeah, so Monolith is all about empowering engineers to develop self-learning models from their engineering test data. With that, they can better understand how their new designs perform across many different conditions and design parameters. So what that means is that they can develop machine learning models to really accelerate new product introductions and get these new products to market much more quickly, primarily by using these models to accelerate and streamline their testing process. So this is software that's usable through your web browser. So I'm a senior software engineer at Monolith. I'm responsible for helping develop and implement that software. I also have an interim role as a security officer, which is why I've ended up taking this ISO 27001 piece. So yeah, that's Monolith. That's what I do at Monolith. I mean, it's a startup, so I have my fingers in a lot of pies. But in terms of something about me that people might not know, so people that do know me know that I love animals, and that I have a clouder of 4 cats, 3 of whom are rescues in some form or another. And my partner and I put a lot of time and effort into making sure those cats have the best lives they can living with us. You know, our home's not just for us, it's for them too. So there's lots of shelves, nooks, opportunities for climbing, general enrichment and such, so they're happy and healthy. But what people who know me might not know is that before I had 4 cats, I kept pet rats. And these animals don't famously get along well together. So it's kind of an either or situation at the moment.
Yeah.
But I kept a colony that peaked at about 8 rats, which isn't all that much in the scheme of rat enthusiasts, but it definitely felt like a lot in my little flat at the time.
Uh, oh, that's fascinating. My nephew had a rat, and yeah, he absolutely loved his little rat. But his girlfriend, who then became his wife, wasn't a massive fan, so the rat had to go. Unfortunately, not everybody's cup of
Yeah.
tea, are they?
You hear that a lot. I think lots of people who spend time with the rats do eventually end up coming around to the idea, but yeah, it's maybe not for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into your journey then with ISO 27001. So this is something that was obviously new for Monolith and I think fairly new for you as well. Could you just explain what the main driver was behind, going for a standard like ISO 27001?
Yeah, so I mean, anyone who's tried to align with ISO 27001 is probably familiar with the typical drivers. At the risk of stating the obvious, we wanted to improve our information security, and we wanted to prove that we take it seriously. And ISO 27001 is a great way to do that. We deal with some big clients that have high demands of the companies they choose to work with in terms of information security. So acquiring ISO 27001 makes it easier to show our clients and prospects that their engineering data are in safe hands. We believe that, they always have been, but we also know, having gone to the effort of implementing an information security management system, it's better now and it will get better with time. We also know that there's a lot of buzz about artificial intelligence and machine learning at the moment. And that buzz covers both sides of the coin, what good it can do for the world and the harms it can do. So aligning with ISO 27001 shows that we're trying to use AI in a responsible way.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, we're starting to use AI here at Blackmores, and yeah, it's just mind-blowing what it can help you to do, but I think, it's something that I think you have to try and be a master of rather than a servant to, and
Exactly that, yeah.
yeah. So I think, obviously being specialist in this area and being able to demonstrate credibility with ISO 27001, yeah, I can see that definitely being advantageous for the business, especially as a startup as well. You're kind of setting your stall out earlier on, aren't you, in terms of how you plan to operate?
For sure, yeah. I agree with all of that. We really want to show that we're taking it seriously, and even though we're a startup, we can still get it right.
Yeah. So how long did it take from beginning to end then?
So the short answer is about 9 months from our onboarding meeting with Blackmores to now. Again, so yeah, we've been recommended for certification currently. Formal certification's last step, and we're hoping that's imminent. So we had a great external audit. My perception is that the effort was quite front loaded. So the amount of effort involved in the process almost wound down towards the end, even with the external audit happening towards the end. I think once the information security management had been established and we'd worked it into our day to day, the perceived effort was lower. So I felt pretty confident going through our audit processes because I'd experienced the system working already.
Yeah, I think that's really great insight into that journey, actually, because I think a lot of businesses would think that, it's a full-time role, 9 months, when actually, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's quite a lot of work involved, particularly with ISO 27001, and just to get to understand what the requirements of the standard are compared to what your business is doing at the moment. And more often than not, you are already complying with lots of areas of 27001. But without any exceptions, there are always opportunities for improvement. I think with 27001, because you've got over 100 controls, so there's bound to be a few there.
Yeah, exactly. And
You might not be taking that seriously, especially with the new standard as well coming out. There will be gaps. And I think when you're creating a management system as well, it's a little bit more time intensive, isn't it? Compared to then when you launch it and then it's almost like, right, okay, guys, it's up to you now. This is your management system. It's for the business. It's not mine anymore. It's yours. So it's about getting others to take responsibility for that. So yeah.
yeah, definitely. I mean, when you're creating, I mean, like you say, it's not from scratch. There's probably stuff you're already doing to meet the controls. But in terms of getting that management system off the ground, there's that big initial effort, but then it's incremental from there. So that's where we are now, thankfully.
Yes, yeah. And you could say that, that's the easiest part. Once you've actually launched it, is just letting people get to understand it and be able to then, yeah, use the benefits of it. And then you can obviously demonstrate evidence of it, which is the assessment part then, isn't it? At the gap analysis stage, I think this standard more so than any others, there are always a lot of gaps. I mean, what would you say was the biggest gap in the gap analysis that you found?
So even though it wasn't that long ago in the scheme of things, I have had to cast my mind back a bit and remember that part of the process. I think that it was that we didn't have a formal approach to information security risk. Risk treatment, that's familiar to lots of people who have managed businesses or parts of businesses. So going through that gap analysis, we found that we had a lot of systems and ad hoc arrangements in place to mitigate information security risk. As you've alluded to already, it's unlikely you'll go into this process and not have any controls in place. But that hadn't necessarily been framed in terms of risk. We hadn't tried to quantify those risks or weigh them against each other. That there was no holistic information security risk management, no big picture. So following the gap analysis, one of the many actions we took was to make sure we were consistently and regularly assessing information security risk in various dimensions. This would make it clear where specific gaps in our risk treatment were, and it's allowed us to always justify policies and guidance to the wider company, and also to make sure that we're spending our time and resources wisely, concentrating on the biggest risks. We're still a small company. There's lots of competing demands for time and resource, so understanding that risk means we can focus where we can have the biggest impact.
Mm. Yeah, because I think if a company hasn't got a formal ISMS, and most companies, that haven't adopted ISO 27001 haven't got that formal system in place, it's difficult to understand what the significance of the risks are until you kind of take a step back and analyse it. That quite often that's the first time for a lot of businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what would you say was the biggest difference it's made then to the business by being able to bridge those gaps?
Yeah, so it's given us more confidence that we understand information security risk to the business, and more confidence that there probably aren't massive unidentified risks. I can't say anything more strongly than that. I think that would be hubris. But regularly thinking about this sort of thing, having it integrated into our day to day or our month to month, means that we're less likely to miss something important. I also think it's made it a lot easier to talk about information security risk and policy decisions. Again, we're a small company with limited resources. We want to minimize impediments to our staff to work in a way that's best for them. We're remote first, with most people working remotely on any given day. We want our staff to be able to experiment with new technologies, use the tools that let them be productive, work where they feel comfortable. We don't want to impose controls that make their lives more difficult without a strong justification for doing so. So using formal risk treatment means that we can maintain this highly flexible, highly innovative, and productive way of working, but with our eyes wide open.
That's a great way of putting it, Ash. I think some organisations think that they're going to be really restricted if they implement ISO 27001, but actually it can enable them to do what they do best, be free to be able to do what they do, but with managing risk at the right level.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, what would you say that you've learnt from this experience then of implementing ISO 27001?
It's a bit of a tricky question to answer because I know that by and large the standards aren't prescriptive. So they don't necessarily tell you how to do something. So probably implicit in this question, I think, is that the standard provides requirements for a management system of some description, an information security management system in the case of ISO 27001. But there will be all sorts of things it doesn't dictate, like how you actually implement controls in the annex. At that point, you choose best practice for that particular control, perhaps. So I suppose what we're talking about is best practice for management systems, thinking a bit like meta about this question. So in that vein, I suppose what I'd highlight as what I've learned this time around, I mean, you know, Mel, this is not my first time implementing an ISO standard, is to better appreciate the nuance in the standard. So I know the standard uses words like should and shall that have particular intentions, shall being mandatory and should being recommended. And this is something your consultants at Blackmores are always really good at highlighting. So I had fewer resources at my disposal in implementing ISO 27001 at Monolith than I've had implementing different standards at bigger companies. And that makes that nuance important. So in a similar vein to my answer about risk management, it helps focus our efforts and use our limited resources in a more targeted way.
Yeah, I think the standard does say what you need to do, but not necessarily how to do it. You're right, it is
Yep.
open to interpretation. But yeah, no, that was a great way of putting it. And also, what would you say have been the main benefits then that have been derived so far when you look back over the last 9 months?
So when I talk about the main benefit, I'm probably going to be talking about the difference that having this holistic and more formal approach to information security compared to the ad hoc approach we had before. So we get the benefits I've already described in terms of confidence in our risk management, which is a big one for sure. I think having the holistic treatment, though, really helps in making it a team effort. It's brought the company together on a really important issue, and it's helped everyone in the company understand what their role is to play in information security. And that's important to understand, that we all have a role in the management system. It's not just the domain of one person or one team. And that's part of the standard, of course. And this is in contrast to how we used to deal with information security, which, as I've described, was largely ad hoc treatment that it might have been siloed to just a handful of employees. It was onerous and not necessarily contextualized. So going through this process and using a well-known standard has helped communicating internally why we're doing certain things, what the benefits are, how it's all working towards our company goals. And everyone has confidence that we're doing something positive. So, my colleagues at Monolith, they've been increasingly positive and supportive about this, particularly as we neared the external audits. And when we were recommended for certification, it was really great to see multiple teams excited at the prospect and how it's going to help them achieve their goals too.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I love hearing about stories like that, how it does help to bring teams together because I think sometimes people think, oh, we've got to get this standard. It's down to one person alone. But actually, it's for the benefit of everybody within the business. And I think once it's communicated in the right way, it can be something that's a really great opportunity to drive momentum and bring people together, to create a system and a way of working that it has your blueprint on it as well, obviously, which is so important when you are growing as an organization too. I think establishing that way of working, that blueprint early on in the company's journey, I think can really pay back in dividends, especially if you've got quite a tight-knit group of people that are involved in, as you say, doing lots of different tasks, like marketing or, on the more technical side of things. I think if everybody's in agreement with that way of working at the early stage, and if you can kind of keep that momentum growing as the company grows, yeah, it can be quite powerful.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, from a personal perspective as well, it's been great reaching out to people that maybe I wouldn't have had the opportunity to work closely with. So it has that effect as well. There's this unifying issue that we all care about. We can all talk about how to achieve those information security goals. It just brings the company together a lot more.
Yeah, because it's much wider than just IT security, isn't it? It is, looking at people, obviously because people managing processes and systems, apps, etc. And then obviously you've got the physical security aspect. And if you've got people that are working remotely at different locations around the globe, again, that adds another dynamic to it. But again, that's where we need controls more than ever, really, to enable us to have that flexibility to work
Yeah,
wherever we want, whenever we want.
yeah, very much agreed.
Mhm. So I know that you've just completed the stage 2 assessment, Ash, and been successfully recommended for certification. I mean, what do you think that, when you do get that certificate, what do you think that's going to help to bring to Monolith AI?
Yeah, so I should say that with or without the certificate, we've most definitely improved our approach to information security. So even if we hadn't been recommended, it's unlikely we'd have binned all the progress we've made on this front. But the main benefit in actually acquiring certification to us in the hypothetical case is improving that benefit to others simply and effectively. We can talk with prospects and clients, and when they have information security questions, the first thing we can say is, yes, we take that very seriously, and we have ISO 27001 certification to prove that. And that statement, I think, is almost immediately understood by most companies, and it can be a satisfactory answer in and of itself. There's also, of course, the benefit regarding all of those prospects that may not have bothered considering us as a supplier because we didn't have the ISO 27001 badge on our website. People are short on time these days, and we've done it ourselves at Monolith when we're considering new suppliers. Does their website mention ISO 27001? If it does, then it makes it really easy to add them to the shortlist, all else being well. And so we would get that benefit too on acquiring certification.
And I think we have to remember that AI is still a relatively new industry, and it could potentially be a USP if you're a specialist in this area, that you've actually got certification to ISO 27001. You could potentially be ahead of the curve, ahead of competitors in that regard as well.
Yeah, we recognize that too. Yeah,
So looking back, I think obviously we first met when you were involved with implementing ISO 14001 at another organisation. So
that's right. Yeah.
you're starting to quickly become an expert in ISO standards now. So looking back, if you could share any tips with somebody that's embarking on implementing an ISO standard, it doesn't necessarily need to be 27001. It could be any ISO standard for that matter. But what top tips would you give them?
So I hope this doesn't seem like a cop out, but if it's their first time, I definitely say hire a professional. I should clarify, that I've not been coached on these questions. I'm here talking to Mel of Blackmores, but I would definitely want Blackmores involved in implementing any new standard. I've done it now, like you say, for ISO 14001. I've done it for ISO 27001. This is my first time implementing 27001, but I helped with ISO 27001 before as well. And both times, Blackmores have helped organize the process, drive a lot of the early gap analysis, given me confidence going through internal and external audit. So if I were to abstract away from just saying, just hire Blackmores, I might say that having somebody around with experience in doing this is going to smooth out the process. Hire them into your business, hire them as a consultant, or train somebody up. Like inside your business, there's probably somebody who's interested in these sorts of things. It can come off as boring sometimes, but I think this is the sort of thing that turns passion into action. So that could be for information security, that could be for environmental management, whatever it is you're looking at. So that person, the trained person, the hired person, they're going to be better aware of the time it takes to do things, of the nuances in the standard, in knowing how to apply the standard to your particular business, and to have the understanding and passion for the topic at hand to get the rest of the business involved. And that's a big challenge, that portion.
Yeah, it's almost like a sales pitch, I guess, isn't it, really, when it comes to it? And I think, one might just assume that it's just a document, and the standard is a document, but it's how you interpret that, isn't it? And I think I really like that phrase that you used, turning passion into action. I love that. I might nick that one.
Very good.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, cool. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Ash, and I know that you're really, really busy, but I've just got a couple of quick questions to ask if that's okay.
Yeah.
If you could gift a book to somebody, what would it be and why?
I'm glad that you asked this, because I can happily tell you that I recently gifted a book to a friend. And that book is called Nature's Calendar, The British Year in 72 Seasons. And it was written by 4 authors, including Kira Chapman, if anyone listening is looking to identify it. So this friend and I were recently at a party and reflecting on how we enjoy using our gardens. And, we recognize the privilege of having this insight into the natural world. I let my garden just sort of do its thing. I think, we often call this rewilding, which can make it seem like a much more active process than it really is. But letting the garden do that, though, means that you come to appreciate the changes that take place without your active guidance or imposition of will. So I spoke with my friend of the wildflowers that grow at different times of year, of the falling of the acorns, of the ecosystems that emerge in the detritus gathered around the border of the garden, and so on. Anyway, back to the book. So this book is inspired by a traditional Japanese calendar, which divides the year into segments of 4 to 5 days. So in the same vein, the book divides the year into 72 seasons and how they manifest in Britain. So in other words, what are the changes to look out for in the natural world that mark where we are in the year? So I have this book open on a stand in my living room. I pick it up every 4 or 5 days to see where we are now. And then when I go for a walk, I think about what it said and see if I can notice those things too. So lots of the seasons will be very familiar to people who've lived in this country their whole life, but they may not have necessarily thought about the context of it. So I think it's really grounding. Time and the way we measure it can seem so arbitrary and abstract sometimes. And measuring minutes and hours is responsible for so much stress and anxiety in society. And so taking a breath, thinking about how nature moves at a different, slower, more deliberate pace, and finding the time to synchronize with that move with nature can be a really rewarding experience. So I wanted to share that with my friend, and I hope she enjoys the book as much as I am.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I absolutely love the sound of that. We're going to have to get that included in the show notes. I think that could be going on my Christmas list.
Yeah.
There's just a concept of, breaking that down into those kind of 4 to 5 day periods. And I think, having that of open and being able to go out because I think one of the things that we miss out on is actually just being present. Just being able to look up and look around rather than rushing from A to B and focusing on the next thing is just enjoying that present moment. And I think that's something that we're realizing is quite a precious thing. That it doesn't cost anything.
No, you're very right. Yeah, it's a great thing.
Yeah, oh, love that. Okay, and finally, last question is: what's your favourite quote that you'd like to leave our listeners with today, Ash?
So a friend of mine commissioned a calligrapher once to produce a gift for me, and it's a quote now hanging on my living room wall. It's definitely one of my favorites. I'm not sure I can say it's the favorite, but it's well up there. It's by Henry Thoreau and his famous book Walden, which is a reflection on simple living in natural surroundings. Having just answered the question about the sort of book I'd gift, it's probably no surprise that this book also appeals to me. The quote goes like this: "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." I think overall, these words convey a longing for a deliberate and purposeful life, lived in close connection with nature and free from the distractions and excesses of modern society. I think there's so much about the world today that can seem overwhelming and chaotic, and living with these words in mind helps me find peace.
I love that. Oh, that's been so insightful to have that conversation with you today, Ash, and to leave us with such a poignant quote as well. I really appreciate that. And yeah, all those tips, I think, our listeners will be able to take, such a lot of value from this conversation today if they're embarking on a journey to implement ISO standards. Yeah, for any standard really. And really, really appreciate that. So thank you once again.
No, thank you too, Mel. Thank you very much.
Great. So thanks very much for listening to the ISO show today. If you'd like to leave a review or any comments on the podcast that you've listened to today, please just go onto your whatever media player you listen to. It'd be great to hear your comments and to be able to like and share the podcast today, because that helps us to get this out to a wider audience. Just finally, as we've been talking about ISO 27001, there is an ISO 27001 transition game plan in the ISology Hub. So we'll include details of that in the show notes. But if any of you are struggling with the transition to the new version 2022, we've got all of the tools, templates and training available online. Or if you'd like, a bit more support with that, then please do feel free to get in touch with us and we'll be happy to talk you through what's involved. Okay, so thanks very much for listening today, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.